This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as financial advice. All views expressed on this podcast are solely the opinions of the host and/or any guests that we might have from time to time. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or to follow a particular investing strategy.
Hello, you sexy sat stackers, and welcome to the Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast. I don't know if you could hear me when I was outside, but I've stepped back inside now. If you couldn't hear me, what is expected to be Hurricane Nicole is raging outside about 12 or so hours before it's expected to make landfall. That's going to be our second hurricane in just over a month. So I'm kind of rushing to get this podcast recorded and uploaded, even though I have a lot to talk about. Last time during Hurricane Ian, we lost power about 12 hours prior to when the eye came by us. And so that might happen sooner than later. Hopefully we keep our power on, and hopefully at least keep it on long enough to get this podcast rolling. But anyway, long and the short of it is, today is Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. And that means it is DCA Wednesday. As of the time of this recording, we are at a block height of 762,450. And the big news in the Bitcoin world is that the Bitcoin price has tanked to currently 17,112 US dollars per Bitcoin, or 5,844 sats per dollar. That is fantastic news because we're going to stack some cheap sats. For those that were guessing or wondering if the bottom was in June, I guess the answer is no. As I mentioned on a couple podcasts, though, I think, the bottom in the previous crypto winter, it seemed like we had established a bottom around $6,000, and then the hash wars kicked off. And that was kind of a black swan event, and that caused Bitcoin to tank down to the 3,000 or whatever level, relatively briefly before it climbed back up to 6. And then slowly ramped up towards the next halving, and then, of course, the next two all-time highs. And so I guess if it happens every halving cycle, it's not exactly a black swan, but it took the failure or the impending failure of one of the world's largest crypto exchanges, FTX, to tank the Bitcoin market and the shitcoin market. So here we go again, right? But this is a good thing because we're going to stack Bitcoin today, the cheapest we've ever stacked it during this podcast. And that is awesome because last time we didn't get quite 100,000 sats for our $20 investment. And this time, hopefully we will. But where was I? That drop in Bitcoin's price has also tanked its market capitalization. Currently, Bitcoin is sitting at a market cap of $328.6 billion. That is $58.5 billion less than last Wednesday. Of course, none of that matters if you don't sell your Bitcoin. In fact, we're stacking. So we're both DCAing and BTFDing today. Buy that dip, even if today isn't your DCA day, because you're going to get more sats for your cuckbuck than you would have just the other day. Along those lines, if you value your metal in value your wealth in shiny yellow metal, it's going to cost you 10.3 ounces of gold to buy one Bitcoin. And along those lines, if you value your wealth in oil, it will cost you 575,108 sats to buy 1 barrel of oil. Or to put it another way, it will cost you 183.19 barrels of oil to purchase just one Bitcoin. And for those of you following along the pizza index, 1 Bitcoin will currently buy you 1,025 Papa John's pizzas. That is still a heck of a lot of pizza, although almost 200 fewer than just last Wednesday. But still over 3.5 years worth of pizza for just 1 Bitcoin. The mempool is not super clogged up considering how much chaos is going on out there. There are currently about 3 blocks worth of transactions pending in my mempool. And it is looking like the fee estimator is saying that it's only going to cost you 15 sats per byte to guarantee that your transaction on-chain transaction is included in the next block. Although 1 sat per byte transactions will still clear within a day, and if you can wait a little bit, it probably wouldn't be that long because by this evening, usually in the nighttime and on the weekends, that mempool clears out. So if you have an on-chain transaction you want to make and you don't mind waiting, 1 SatProbyte transactions will allegedly still clear, but you probably want to use replace by fee just to make sure. And as if to prove me wrong, that metric that I love to follow, the 24-hour transaction rate, well, it is way up there at 3.46 transactions per second. I don't know if I'm having a hard time talking because I'm in a hurry or because I was just getting sandblasted out there and I still got sand and grit in my teeth. But if you've been following along, you know that up until this point in time, anytime we've seen a 24-hour transaction volume above 3.14 transactions per second, Bitcoin has been trending up. That is not the case for the first time in over a year that we've been doing this podcast. But, it's a weird day. So everything's out the window on a Black Swan day like today. Since the last podcast, Bitcoin had a mining difficulty adjustment. It was a very small one. It was a decrease, actually, of minus 0.2%. As you know, Bitcoin adjusts its mining difficulty every 2016 blocks, which is theoretically every 2 weeks. But when blocks are coming in faster than 10 minutes on average, that obviously is less than 2 weeks. And if they're dragging out slowly, that is more than 2 weeks. And that is why the difficulty is adjusted to try and keep an average block time of 10 minutes. We are currently 1,614 blocks away from the next difficulty adjustment. That is still about 11 days, a little over 10 days away, looking like that's going to be on November 20th. And depending where you get your data, it's looking like that's going to be a huge increase anywhere between 2.9 to 5%. Although if the Bitcoin price remains this low for long, I would imagine that some of these miners are going to shut their equipment off because most of the big commercial miners were already losing money. Many of them were rumored to be facing insolvency. So I guess only time will tell. But, the difficulty is pretty much at new all-time highs almost every time we meet and talk. So it's too soon to tell, but right now it's looking like it's going to be another difficulty increase, potentially a significant one as high as 5%. And that is because blocks are currently averaging only 9 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's 30 seconds faster than that 10-minute target, and hence the increase in mining difficulty to try and bring that back down to 10 minutes. Although oftentimes when we're still more than a week away from the next difficulty adjustment, the estimate is way off. And, maybe next week we'll get a much better idea, especially because either the price will have recovered or maybe the miners that are not profitable will have decided whether they're turning their mining rigs off or not. Only time will tell. And so what's all this hubbub about? I'm sure you know. There was that tit for tat on Twitter between FTX's Sam Bankman-Fried and Binance's CZ. And apparently it looks like Binance is going to be buying FTX. And depending on who you listen to, some people are blaming CZ for tanking FTX's valuation by dumping their FTX's token, their native shitcoin, and crashing the price of their token. Other people say that it was because basically FTX's entire net worth was wrapped up in their token, and when the token started to lose value, that caused an incipient spiral. Who knows? All that matters is that Bitcoin is on sale. And I'm going to go ahead and make our DCA stack really quick. So far, the power hasn't even flickered yet, but it is getting really windy out there. If you listen to the intro, you probably got that impression. It is just ripping. But as usual, we're going to do our DCA stack using the handy dandy Cash App. If you're new to this episode or you don't know what DCA is, that's short for dollar cost averaging. And dollar cost averaging is an investment strategy where you invest your money in equal portions at regular intervals, regardless of price. For example, this is going to be our 68th stack. We started stacking every Wednesday back on July 28th of 2021. So far, we've stacked 67 times, $20 a pop for a total of $1,340 US, including $30.15 in fees. And that has earned us a stack of 4,058,959 Satoshis. We are significantly underwater on that investment. Our average cost basis is $33,013.39. But the neat thing about a day like today is not only are we going to stack more Satoshis, it's going to drive that average cost basis down. And, if you're like me and you believe that one day there's going to be hyper Bitcoinization, even if it doesn't become the world's global reserve currency, Bitcoin has a long way to go before it peaks, in my humble opinion. And by this time, 4 years from now, $33,013 is going to look like a good deal. This was the first halving cycle that Bitcoin fell below its previous all-time high after setting a new record all-time high. Again, a lot of things are different this time. The graph of the cycles, when you look at them, obviously they don't repeat, but they do rhyme. They you can see the trend where we are compared to the previous two halving cycles if you look at a chart of the three cycles overlaid. And this time, while it's trending very similarly, it was this is the first time Bitcoin's ever experienced a worldwide inflation and potentially a recession or depression coming up. In addition to we had the virus scare that kind of may or may not have affected the previous bull run before the halving. We had a kind of a weird double top during the bull run. So a lot of things are different, but in general, they're similar enough that I still think that 210,000 block theory is intact, that the 4-year halving cycles will continue to impact the price of Bitcoin as they always have, because supply and demand doesn't change even if the economic outlook for the globe changes. Regardless of whether there's a depression or whether the global economy is booming, the amount of Bitcoin, the new amount of Bitcoin that's available from miners that gets dumped on the market, the Bitcoin mining reward is going to be cut in half again in 2024. That's less than 2 years away now. So hopefully we'll see that cycle repeat at least one or two more times before maybe achieving that hyper Bitcoinization. All right, I digress. We're opening up that Cash App before the power starts flickering. And while I've been yapping, Bitcoin actually dipped quite a bit, but then it's popped back up. It was under 17 for a while. I think I saw as low as 16,800, but it's over 17 again. So we're going to make that purchase, enter $20, click confirm, and boom, we have purchased another 114,161 sats for a price of $17,116.14 per coin. That is by far the cheapest we have ever purchased during this run, during this podcast. The previous cheapest we'd ever purchased Bitcoin was back in September when we purchased for $18,462.67. Today's purchase is going to bring our stack up to 4,173,120 sats. And perhaps as importantly, it's going to knock that average cost basis down another $400 and something to $32,589.53. We have whittled that average cost basis down by more than $700 already just in November, and that is pretty cool. I guess in the grand scheme of things, all that really matters is the number of sats you have in that stack is continuing to increase. The average cost basis probably will be moot if you're looking at $150,000 Bitcoin or $500,000 Bitcoin or $1 million Bitcoin or $10 million Bitcoin, buying whether your average cost basis is $5,000 or $30,000 or $100,000 won't really matter, except for when it comes to doing your taxes, if there is still a tax authority to report that to. All right, before I wrap this up, I want to reach out to you and ask you to help us out by following us on Twitter. And on Twitter, we are at BTC Bulletin Pod. And I would also like to hear what you have to say. If you have something you would like for me to discuss on this podcast, or something that you don't like about this podcast and would like to see changed, or you just want to say you're loving this podcast and you're following along, it'd be great to hear from you. Again, you can DM me on Twitter at BTC Bulletin Pod, or follow along and maybe comment on some of our posts. Again, if you're listening on your favorite Podcasting 2.0 app, you can shout us out a boostagram. And if you do, and it isn't obscene or a shill, we'll read that on the following episode of the Bitcoin Bulletin podcast. But again, please follow us on Twitter at BTC Bulletin Pod. If you prefer to use email, my email address is Bitcoin Bulletin at protonmail.com. And while you're at it, if you want to help the show out, one way you can do so is you can give us a review on whatever podcasting app you're listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, or if you want to, however you listen to podcasts, if you give us a review, even if it's not, a 5-star review, but obviously we'd appreciate a 5-star review. But every I don't think we have enough reviews on this podcast for the reviews to even count yet. So we need to get a few more reviews, and that'll help us spread the message, help us maybe orange pill some more people. Again, I'm keeping this one short and sweet because we do have a hurricane raging out there. The second one this year. Last time we were without power for about a little over 2 days. This storm looks like it might be a little worse for us where we're at than Ian was. We didn't get that much damage at all from Ian, but we were without power for a while. And if this one is at least that bad, we're going to be losing power shortly. And while I'll probably be able to find, cellular or data somewhere, I want to get this podcast uploaded. But until then, don't forget to join us every Wednesday. We're going to keep adding to that stack with our DCA Wednesday episodes. And don't forget to buy those dips. If Bitcoin tanks even more, that is not the end of the world. In fact, that's a good thing. I just put in a couple more limit orders because all the ones I had set all cashed in. So I bought the dip. I bought the dip a couple times while I wasn't even paying attention because, I put some custom purchase orders in on Cash App, and both of those fulfilled. So I've got a couple more. If Bitcoin drops into the 16s again, or even I put one in at 15 just for fun, that would be fantastic. But again, don't forget to join us next Wednesday for a dollar cost averaging DCA Wednesday episode, and every Wednesday until we either become stinking filthy rich, Bitcoin goes to the moon, or you get bored and stop listening. But until then, keep on stacking those sats, you sexy sat stackers.